Welcome, Danielle Bass. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today on the Legally Blissed podcast. So let me tell everyone just a little bit about Danielle. She is a corporate attorney at Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich & Rosati, where she focuses her practice on transactional matters involving information technology, my favorite, intellectual property, data, and media, with an emphasis on commercial relationships. Danielle frequently drafts and negotiates various agreements regarding the development, license, and transfer of intellectual property, media, and technology, including related service agreements on behalf of clients across a number of industries. Prior to joining WSGR, Danielle was a partner at Hottingman and a corporate finance associate at Dykema Gossett. Danielle earned her JD from the University of Michigan Law School, where she graduated magna cum laude and Order of the Coif. When Danielle is not on the clock, you can find her on her yoga mat or in the kitchen with her daughter baking. So thanks again for hanging out with me today, Danielle. Let me ask you, what is your favorite treat to bake with your little girl?
Oh, that's tough. So she's big on scones. It's actually like the cutest thing. We make scones in the air fryer of all things. And her favorite thing is like helping me mix, and then we put it in the air fryer. And she likes like cinnamon raisin scones. And last week we made pumpkin spice scones.
Oh Lord! Oh my gosh! It sounds amazing. How'd they turn out? They turn out okay?
They turned out good. She told me that they were too dark on the top. But that's just like how air fryers work, but we're working on it.
It's like a work in progress, right?
I'm like, every day of my life is like Top Chef toddler edition, and I haven't, been fired yet. So I nod and I say, thank you, chef, and we call it a day.
Yeah. I love that. So you also said that you are on your yoga mat a lot. So let me ask you, how has yoga impacted your legal practice?
Excellent question. So it's ironic, but the owner of my yoga studio is an tax lawyer of all things. But really, I started practicing. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, and I started practicing as soon as I finished my track season, my senior year. And it really just helped make me present for an hour or however many minutes of my day, where I can connect with my body, get out of my head, and just feel like I'm getting the yayas out, is like I like to say it. And it makes me more present, makes me more thoughtful, and it helps me in my everyday work in just taking a breath, taking a beat, taking a pause. Besides just the physical benefits, it's more of just letting my mind marinate around whatever is happening. I do transactional work, like you mentioned, and oftentimes it's not as contentious as I'd say are my friends in litigation, but it is a situation where both parties want to have their way. And so trying to advocate for your client, aggressively or zealously, as well as, getting a deal done, is a very, tough tightrope to walk. So it helps me do that. And it also just not being on a screen for an hour. I remember just being in college, and it was the only time I was away from my phone. And that was really monumental. And now it's literally, I'm away from every screen available to me.
That's amazing. So you have sort of your own kind of internal, I guess, practice that you're doing versus following a video, particularly when you're at your house.
Oh yeah. So during the pandemic, I built myself a hot yoga studio.
Good for you.
It's really the only thing keeping me going. But I do live stream with my studio, and then I practice on my own. So
I love that. So you love yoga. And okay, so let me ask you this. This is really cool. You told me something about you that I thought was absolutely fascinating. And when you told me, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk with her. You managed to become a partner by the time you're 29 years old. And I know, as many of us, when we get out of law school, if we go straight to law school, like we're looking 22 out of college, right? 25 out of law school. I'm being very general. And that's like your traditional kind of path. And that's a fairly like straightforward path. And even at that point, I couldn't imagine making partner at 29 years old. So I want to know how you did this.
Excellent question. No, and it's funny because I had found in undergrad, I had done like a capstone course where we were just thinking about where we would like to be in 10 years. And I was 21. And, I had drawn a picture of myself at 21 and then at 22. And I said, I'm going to have, I'm going to be married. I had been dating my now husband at the time. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have one kid, which I knew somehow was going to be a girl. And I've like forgotten about that. And I'll be partner at a law firm and like all this stuff. And like, I had forgotten that I'd like made all of these plans. And then here I was, January 2020, looking at Liv's picture and being like, whoa, I did all of the things. It was like vision boarding,
Yes.
times a million. So I started my career at, like you mentioned, at Dykema Gossett. I was a general corporate associate. I did everything kind of just like soup to nuts, securities, financing, corporate governance, all of that fun stuff. And I really always liked soft IP. I liked commercial transactions. I liked the vibe of just helping businesses get a tool, get a service, sell something, buy something, rather than like companies, which felt very just like, just not my speed in terms of timing and just like energy. And so I wanted to do more of that work. And, I just wasn't getting the opportunities that I thought I was, that I was needed at the time. And around that time, a good friend of mine who was in law school and I was in undergrad at Michigan was moving home, and he was starting the technology transactions practice at Honigman and was like, come be our first associate hire. And I was like, no, I'm super happy, because I also thought when you went to a law firm, you went through the whole, dating process of interviewing for summer associate positions. Like, you find your firm and you stay committed, you are loyal, you are married. And so there I was, like 18 months, at this firm, and thinking like, this isn't for me. Like I struggled with that. So the long story short is I ended up leaving Dykema, going to Honigman and loving it, and really just jumping in with 2 feet. They have a shorter runway to partnership, so you're eligible after year 5, which was what year I was. But it was also what I like to think is just like, I took the bull by the horns and I took ownership of every single transaction or client interaction that I had. I treated every partner like they were my client. I treated every client like they were, the most important thing in my life. And I tried to learn as much as I could. I was the only associate in the group, so I was doing just a ton of reps on everything from, services agreements to, SaaS arrangements or licenses and things like that. And the thing that I found, was I quickly earned the trust of a lot of clients because I was human to a certain extent. I always I think you get 2 types of lawyers in big law, we're going to get it done and this is how it's going to be, and very prescriptive and has kind of no personality. And I like what I do. I want to continue to do this for a very long time. And so I try to get to know my clients. I talk to them like I would talk to, you or my friends or my family. I make really, really funny metaphors to try to explain business issues to them. And I've found over the years that people like that. So I was given a lot of trust and a lot of responsibility really, really early on, because I indicated I was ready for it. And then I showed that I was. So, I was a 4th year associate managing $800,000 of a book of business and looking at the bills and managing the client relationship. And that was amazing. So yeah, I made partner at 29. With my I think 18 month in tow. I had been on maternity leave the year before, and that was a big concern of mine.
Right.
Yeah, and that was a hard kind of management of work-life balance. As I, Layla, my daughter, just figuring out how to be present for her, but also be present for my clients, and just being honest about that. But it took a lot of grit, a lot of mental toughness, a lot of sweat on my yoga mat, but we made it.
with Layla on board. I love that.
Yeah.
So this is, I can tell that client experience is super important to you. And have you have a track record of going above and beyond for your clients. Like I love the idea of doing like the metaphors. It's really cool. They were able to develop trust in you, even though you were a young associate, right? And I think that sometimes clients are like, oh, she's so young, can she do this? So can you give me like one of your favorite tips in terms of how to make your clients feel amazing or appreciated?
Yeah. So in the type of work that I do, I'm often communicating either directly with business people, so people that don't have any legal experience, and I'm really kind of talking in layman's terms with them, or I'm working with in-house counsel that isn't necessarily up to speed on the particular subject matter that I'm an expert in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what I'm doing, and something that I think no one really teaches you in law school, is client counseling with like kid gloves, right? So explaining something and not saying like, look, we need the indemnity to cover your infringement. We have to make sure that this is carved out from the limitation of liability. Like that doesn't resonate with your average Joe. So talking about what kind of, what does this feel like in the real world? What are the actual risks? What do we do about it? And a lot of that is like an education piece. Having conversations with the client about, why is this important to you? And like helping empower them to ask questions about how this impacts them, because they're the ones driving the commercial terms. They're the ones driving the deal. I'm just there to hold their hand from a legal perspective and a risk allocation perspective. And so again, I'm like big on like metaphors and trying to help. I use dating often, which is ironic because I've been with my husband since we were 17 and I like have no idea how dating works anymore. But, I talk a lot about like, look, guys, we're prenupping the relationship. Like we think we're in love. We think that this is going to be, rainbows and butterflies. But what happens down the road if things don't turn out as planned? Who's going to take care of, the dog? Who's going to keep the house? Like we need to think about these types of things. And usually, one, it disarms them because legal gives a lot of business people, particularly anxiety. They feel like we are a hurdle. They feel like we are not on their team. And like that's why I went to law school. I am the legal problem solver. Like I am on every single team of my, clients. I want them to see me as their trusted advisor. I don't want to be, I hate when lawyers get the reputation of being like just, hurdles in the deal. Like that's just like not my vibe. And so one is like, I like to disarm them. I love making my clients laugh. Sometimes it's not appropriate, but I do it. And and then just like answering questions and being like, does that make sense to you? And trying to empower them to feel like they understand the deal, because the worst case scenario is that I make decisions for a client that they feel uncomfortable with, and then they sign a deal, something goes wrong, and they come back to me and they're like, what did we do this for? And they can't explain it themselves. So I think that's how I like to make my clients feel special. I also am always very, very communicative about expectations on like turnaround and availability and all of those types of things. Every client thinks that they are the most important client, and I like to make them believe that they are. So doing my best to help that.
I love that. So what would you say your superpower is as a attorney and human?
Superpower. I can handle a lot. I have the like persistence and like just capacity to take on a lot, both substantively and otherwise. I find myself on the phone with clients often and thinking like, they are just like, they're venting to me. Like I am the most expensive therapist in the world right now. But but it happens often. And my husband often says, like, it's because you give them like the trust that they feel like they can talk to you about whatever is happening from, like they're frustrated with the deal that, they're talking about like the emotions behind that, and just being like a kind, ear to listen to. And like, I have some emotional intelligence that I feel like people appreciate.
Mhm.
But I take on a lot. I am extremely good at organizing my time and spinning thousands and thousands of plates simultaneously. A lot of feedback that I get is that, like, how did you do it all those fun things? And like, it's less of like, how do I do all of the things, but like, when do I do all of the things? Because there's going to be all of the things to do. It's just trying to make it work. And so I'm very regimented. I have a very, very prescriptive lifestyle. I wake up every morning at 4 and I work out, and I have my mornings, and then I, take my daughter to school and like time block my day. So I would say just like the ability to just do and handle a lot. Of course, it's to my detriment often, because I often don't, raise my hands and say like, we're going down, like I can't handle anymore. So working on that.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's just as important to be able to not take it on, right? And to be okay with saying no to certain things. So I think it's really fascinating. You told me that you were also teaching at Michigan, right?
Yes, I'll be teaching a course next. It's the winter course. Registration just opened for the class.
I'm gonna go sign up right now. So this is really cool. And will this be your first experience teaching?
Yeah. So in law school, I was part of this clinic. It was a lab where we worked with Fortune 500 companies and basically did the projects that their in-house teams didn't have time for and they didn't want to pay outside counsel for. And I loved it. It was unbelievable, gave me so much experience. The professor was amazing, and they no longer offer the lab. And in the last few years, I often get cold calls from law students or from summer associates and first years of like, I want to do the type of work you're doing. Where do I learn more? And law school is historically not super helpful for transactional students generally in providing them practical, experiences. But even when you do get those practical experiences, right, you do like, your entrepreneurship clinic, your drafting or your, negotiation, there's no one really talking about like IP transactions or technology transactions or commercial transactions as it relates to technology. And it's a burgeoning market. A ton of big laws firms have huge practice groups as it relates to it. And so I was talking to a professor and I was like, I wish that they had just a class about this. And he was like, okay, well, why don't you teach it? And I was like, yeah, that's really funny. Because I would guest lecture, like, in certain classes at Michigan as it related to my practice, and I loved it always. And he was like, no, really, like talk to the dean about it. And so I did, and they were like, yeah, what day works best for you? And I was like, are you sure? Like, I am not qualified at all. And they were like, no, we want somebody kind of in the trenches that, remembers what it's like to be a law student and a first year, second year, but kind of knows how to manage up, manage down. And so you're perfectly situated to do this. And so I have a lot of imposter syndrome as it relates to it, but we are managing it and coping, and I'll let you know how it goes.
No, yeah, I want you to come back on after you've started teaching, like let's say maybe in the spring, and then we can reconnect on it. I'd love to hear about your experience, but I think it's really interesting that you so quickly say, I'm not qualified. And I'm like, you are so qualified, right? First thing I thought was, oh no, she's got imposter syndrome, right? Like you don't hear men saying that as much, although men do have imposter syndrome. It's so much more, I guess, pervasive amongst females to question like, well, should I really be here? Do I deserve this? Can I really give back the way that I want to in this position? And I have no doubt it's going to be an amazing course that you're doing. So I'm really, really excited for you, and I'm excited to learn more about it and how it goes. So I bet there's going to be a good number of students that are registering for it. And one thing I love is that you saw like a need right? You saw that there was this missing piece and you brought it up to someone and they were so receptive. They're like, yeah, come teach.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
It's so funny. So my husband always says that it's not who you know, but it's who knows you. So like when people know your character, when they know your value, and they know your personality, and they know, the type of, person you are and what you're interested in, it's way more valuable than you asking somebody for anything.
Mm.
And so, I mean, this was like one of those perfect kind of opportunities or examples of that, in which I found a situation that I said something very off the cuff, and he was like, no, we're going to make this happen. And I kind of secretly always dreamed of teaching at Michigan
Yeah.
Law. I mean,
Yeah.
teaching
Yeah.
anywhere, like it's so humbling to like, just being on campus and thinking like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm here. Whenever I get emails and they're like, Professor Bass, I'm like, who's that?
Yeah. That's so
So
cool. Yeah. And you're like immediately like, who's Professor Bass? Oh, that's me.
that's me. Yeah. So yeah.
Could you foresee teaching at Michigan or any university becoming a larger part of your kind of work portfolio?
Yeah, I think that, so one of the things that makes my heart super full and I'm really passionate about is like just sharing the experiences that I've had, because nobody really prepares you for life in big law, or in a big law firm generally. I mean, I felt super prepared to draft, the reps and warranties in an asset purchase agreement for, a patent transaction, or, whatever substantive, task came my way. But like, how do you talk to clients? How do you manage your own work-life balance, air quotes? How do you protect your time? How do you, give feedback? How do you get feedback? And just some of these like very people oriented type of skills that you have to learn along the way. And I was super lucky to have great mentors and people who taught me a lot and protected me. And I don't see that as much in my practice, or in the people that I, am surrounded by. And so in any way I can do that for the people behind me, it's totally, a priority. But also I see so many women of my year, of years above me, leaving in droves and going to either, in-house positions, which is totally fine, going to private practice or contract positions, or just like leaving the practice altogether. And it's so devastating to me, at least, because like I spent a lot of time and effort and money and like energy getting my degree, and I'm really, really proud of it. And I like what I do. Like, I think it still feels like work. I don't believe the do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. Like, it's work. It is hard. It is mentally exhausting. But do I leave feeling good about what I'm doing? Absolutely. And so when I see other women leaving, I think, what tools did they not have? What values did they not have? Like, those types of things. And so if I can empower, 5, 6, 7, a dozen, young women to stay and do what they wanted to do because they had those tools, like, excellent, like dream come true.
So what are your thoughts on the value of mentorship? I think I know where you're going to go with this. Maybe the question should be, what are your thoughts on setting up kind of like more rigid mentor relationships, right? Like within a law firm, like having like a structured program. You ask where these people go, right? Like, where do the young women go? we leave, right? I mean, we come out of law school, most of us are women, and then by the time partnership rolls around, like 15% of us are represented. So what about mentorship programs within law practices?
So I'm actually not a fan of formal mentorship because I don't think it's organic. I think mentorship is something that happens along the way, right? Like, my best mentors are people that I worked for, in passing. I was a research assistant for a professor, and like, just had these interactions with him that let me feel like he knew me and that I could trust him. And then, I would call him and ask him, about lateraling or about situations I was dealing with at work, and like felt like I could get, some kind of feedback from him and things like that. And so there's those situations. There's people that you are in leadership positions with. So I'm part of an organization called the Association for Corporate Growth, which is a middle market kind of networking group of chapters all over the world. And like, it's not just lawyers. And I do a ton of work with recruiters and private equity people and investment bankers and accountants and things like that. And like talking to them and learning from them and just like interacting with them. I think mentorship is something that's like, it's like professional friendship almost. Like, it's like, I see you as a person, we have a professional relationship, and like, I want to be a deeper relationship. When you have this formal relationship in like a law firm and you're assigned somebody and like it feels very rigid, like you feel like you have to be there, and it's like an arranged marriage, if you will. Like, let me date, let me find the right mentor, the right fit for me. When I came back from maternity leave, I was assigned a mentor that, was also a young mom. And to a certain extent, it was nice, but I also was like craving like the partner that was like, 20, like her kids were 20 years old and she had done this, and she could say, look, your kids are going to turn out fine if you miss bath time one night, or screw work, go to Gymboree, do what you need to do. Like, this is not important. You will never get this back. And it took me, sitting down with the older, partner and just being really vulnerable and being like, I am struggling to figure out how to make this work. Like, I had a young baby or toddler at home, and just being like really vulnerable in that moment, and something that I frankly would never have done with a male partner or colleague. And like teary-eyed, and she looked at me and just like was like, Danielle, like, this is fine. And she had a full conversation with me, and that was something that wasn't formal. She owed me no time. And then I felt really comfortable to like call her and thank her and talk to her. And that was like an organic experience that I never think I would have had if it was a like matchmaker situation.
An arranged marriage, right? That's a good analogy. And it kind of goes back to your relationships and dating analogies that you like using. But so, okay, like let's say I'm a young associate and I'm kind of quiet, I'm kind of introverted, I've been thrown into this legal world. My family, I don't come from a family full of lawyers, so I'm not super connected. So if I wanted to find a mentor and initiate a conversation, do you have any guidance on that in terms of like how to do it, who to look for, and how to actually approach someone, and how to maintain an amazing relationship? I just threw in like 4 questions there.
So I will say too, like the mentorship relationship is on the mentee. It's not on the mentor. I have had mentor relationships where like, or people that like want to be my mentor, and I'm like, I don't want you as a mentor. Like, I choose you as my mentor. Like, you don't choose me. So there is some onus on the mentee to like be proactive. And I think that that's the right approach. And my advice generally in anything that a young lawyer is doing is to look for the people and the type of work that you think you want to do in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, and say, do I like their life? Of what I know, are they, mid-divorce, never see their kids? Are they unhappy, stay at the office all the time? Or are there pictures of their kids and they're leaving at 4 to go to dance or whatever the situation is? Like, look at their lifestyle, look at how happy they are, look at their success in work. And if that's something that you see in yourself as something of interest, then I would be really, really honest. And I would say, hi, my name's Danielle. I'm a new associate at XYZ firm. And then it doesn't have to be at your firm. That's their secret, is like, I think some of the best mentors are not at your firm half the time.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
And they don't even have to be lawyers. Sometimes they're other successful business people. But I would just say, I'm starting out my career. I love how you've been able to navigate whatever you're interested in, insert that. I would love to take you to coffee or do a Zoom or whatever it is and just pick your brain on, you know, tips and tricks and like things that I might be able to learn along the way from you. And then you do that and you are kind and generous and you know, you spend the time. But it's really relationship building. Like it's if you hit it off and you have a great conversation with somebody, like shoot them an email, say thank you. And then like 6 months later or 3 months later, say like, I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm thinking about what we talked about and I'm dealing with this. Do you mind getting lunch? And then you build those relationships over time. And I think a lot of the time, young attorneys or just people in general want, you know, relationships to happen like that, but it takes time and energy and sewing. And so I think just treating it like that is a really great approach.
Mm-hmm. Wow, there's some gems of wisdom in there.
Good.
So let me ask you, what is the biggest mistake that you think young lawyers are making right now?
Not protecting their time.
Mm.
I just spoke at Michigan Law in their entrepreneurship class and was talking about how I'm very, very strategic about and intentional about protecting certain times. So every morning I take my daughter to school and that's my time and I'm not available ever for that time. That's my time for me and Layla. And then, you know, I do bedtime every single night. That's my thing. Mm-hmm. And I do not take calls during that time. They're, you know, the Wilson Sonsini is not going to burn down if I'm not available at 7 p.m. That means I have to be available afterwards and sometimes before and sometimes early in the morning. But I was talking about that and a young woman raised her hand and was like, that's really awesome. And like, I like, you know, the thought of that, but like as a first year, like I don't have that goodwill. So like, how do I protect my time? And I think that's true. I mean, I've earned a lot of my stripes. I think that's an excellent, you know, a very astute observation. But at the same time, I said to her, you are the only one looking out for you. So you protect your time. It doesn't, I mean, I don't not be available for like hours on end, but like if yoga is really important to you and like you want to make a 6:30 class 3 days a week, block it off on your calendar. If you get an invite or someone asks you to do something, I'm not available during that time. I can get to it at XYZ, and be intentional because no one is looking out for you. People think, and I thought that there was a stop, you know, a red button that just like an escalator, right? That like stopped everything when it felt like too much. And there's not that. Like big law is a machine and you are a commodity. And if you say yes, they will keep giving it to you. So you are the only one to press that red button and say like, no, no more. And to protect your time, protect your weekends, teach people how to treat you. You know, I think a lot of young attorneys think it's like cool to be super busy and bill the most. And it's like super sexy to send emails at like 2 a.m. Like, that's not cool. Like I'm sleeping at 2 a.m. Like that is not a lifestyle for success. Like, and at most big law firms, it's lockstep. So if I bill 1950 or if I bill, you know, 2100, we're making the same amount of money. Like it doesn't, you don't get a special prize for being more tired. And sometimes you do have to do that, right? Sometimes there's big deals and some, you know, big cases where you're required to work into the night, and like that's a exception and not the rule.
That is
so I would say being intentional from the get-go about setting boundaries and keeping them and maintaining them. And that doesn't mean you can't have 1 or 2 times that, you know, you do work a weekend or you do work, you know, late into the night or you miss a yoga class or, you know, whatever it is. But if you've got that baseline, you're going to be fine. And that's going to set you up for a career where you don't burn out at year 5 or where you're not like looking to leave because you're unhappy, and setting you up for like a long career.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that you're protecting your own mental health, right? And not letting people breach those boundaries that you set up.
Yeah.
One thing go ahead.
It's because when people prioritize, like I don't live to work, I work to live, right?
Mhm.
So when people prioritize their job over their families or their health or anything else, like, you're gonna lose those other things. And I see too many colleagues who have mental health issues, who aren't eating, who have lost relationships with friends and family, or, you know, spouses or children. And like, no job in the world is worth that
No,
at all.
no. So you had said, I'd asked you, I think this is a good tie-in. What's your must-share strategy or piece of advice? And I want to read what you said. And I think this ties in perfectly with what you just said. Danielle said, time is of the essence. Invest time in what brings you joy and pure love. Everything else is a waste of time. So it's like looking at your life through that lens of what brings joy and love to you know, and approaching and prioritizing the work so that, you know, your time is respected. It's precious. You can always earn more money, right? You can always get another job, but you cannot get back, you know, the time that you have, you know, putting the little girl to bed in the evening, right? Or your carved out time that you have with her in the morning. So that time never comes back. And you know how it is, like in a couple of months, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like, how has she grown 6 inches, right? It all happens so fast. And, you know, I think that people, maybe this is partly because of the pandemic, I'm not really sure, but people do seem to be reflecting, right? And they're kind of analyzing, where have I been spending my time, right? Because we get so caught up kind of in the wheel of of doing life, and we don't take that time to really just sit down and reflect, where are we spending our time? Like, what is really important to us? Where are our priorities? So, and I just think that your piece of advice here is like a perfect quote, right? Time is of the essence. Invest time in what brings you joy and pure love. Everything else is a waste of time. Danielle Bass, I love that. So where can people find you, Danielle?
Yeah, so I'm at Wilson Sonsini. You can always reach out to me through there or LinkedIn. Happy to always connect with other attorneys, whether or not you're in my practice area or not. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I want to be respectful of your time, but this has been a lot of fun, and I hope that we can connect again in a few months, because I would love to hear about how teaching is going. Professor Bass.
Yes, my
I'm
pleasure.
going to start calling you that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Yep.
Okay, bye.